Hello, everyone. My name is Sofiya Filippova, and today I'm going to be presenting my project, Blue Bike Mounted Air Pollution Monitors. This is a project that I'm completing as a portion of my mechanical engineering senior design requirement and is advised by Professors Anthony Lin and Professor Emily Ryan. I would also like to give a huge shout out to my other senior design members, without whom this project would not be possible, and they are Luisa, Maya, Leon, and Reina. All right, before we get into the details of this project, I would like to start out with an overarching motivation for why we're doing this project to begin with. So our project seeks to contribute to the growing body of research trying to answer the question, how do the effects of air pollution vary between neighborhoods with different socioeconomic status? As you can see on this slide, there are a growing number of papers and projects trying to answer just this question or some variation of it. But when you look at the core of all of these projects, they all hinge on data. So let's take a look at some of the current data availability to address this question and these projects at large. This is a map of all the current air pollution monitors currently operated by the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. As you can see, in what we call Boston proper area, there are only really 4 air pollution monitors, and even as we zoom out into the suburbs, there are only really 3 more. And don't get me wrong, these air pollution monitors are fantastic. They're extremely expensive, they've been validated to no end, and they're extremely accurate. But because of their lack of density in the Boston area, they can only really tell us about what we call macro trends in air pollution. So what does pollution in Boston look like at large? So our team deems that the current data on air pollution is not an accurate representation of local neighborhood level air pollution in Boston. And that is where our project comes in. So the goal of our project is to design a portable, cost-effective air pollution monitor to be mounted on the Blue Bike system in Boston. And keep in mind the map I just showed you, and let's take a look at all the Boston Blue Bike stations that are available and currently online. Blue Bike says that there are roughly 400 stations in the greater Boston area, and roughly at each station there are 10 Blue Bikes. So comparatively, many, many more opportunities for data collection. And in a perfect world, when we have all the funding in the world, very far down the line, we imagine that one of these monitors can be placed on virtually every single bike in the Boston area. All right, how does the device work? It's actually pretty simple. What you do, what the rider does is they pull the bike out of the docking station and begin their commute. As the rider is riding along the streets, air enters through into these side holes and flows over the sensors, and the sensors collect data based on where the rider is currently. That data is then communicated to our team wirelessly, and as the rider docks the bike back into the station, the device senses that it is no longer in motion and turns off data collection capabilities. All right, so let's jump into some of the details that have been governing this project. So as I mentioned earlier, we do want this device to be cost effective. The current air pollution monitors that are deployed can run you several $1,000s. So to be cost effective, we want to stay underneath $300 per unit. And although that might not seem cheap, it is comparatively very affordable. Additionally, we want our air pollution monitor to fit comfortably underneath the bike basket as well as be unobtrusive, which is why we choose the bike basket as where we're mounting our air pollution monitor. And we believe that this does not infringe on rider experience or safety, more importantly. Additionally, of course, we need to collect all relevant data. So that includes particulate matter, methane, nitrous oxides, and carbon dioxide, as well as some data to contextualize what we're reading from these sensors, including temperature, humidity, and GPS data. And all of us that live in Boston are very aware of all the crazy weather conditions. So even as we want air flowing over the sensors to collect that data, we want to make sure that the sensor is robust and weather resistant to not allow any weather, specifically water, into the sensors to mess with how the sensors are working. And I am happy to announce that all of these measures were met in our senior design project, and this is one of our greatest prides as we're finishing this project this year. And that leads me into our results. So as I mentioned previously, all of the design constraints were met. We've also begun some prototype fabrication. So we currently have 4 enclosures that are fabricated alongside 9 completed circuit boards, and we're working to get all 9 of those circuit boards into enclosures. Additionally, we have begun some preliminary data collection to verify some of our design constraints here. So I'll point your attention to this graph that's in the bottom left-hand corner. This is a test that was actually performed by the group that was working on this project prior to our involvement. And this was a test to make sure that the GPS is working as we intended to. So what happened here is that Professor Ryan took the device home and walked around her neighborhood right by a known methane leak. As you can see on this graph here, one street is green. You can see that there's no methane leak, and on the other, we very clearly see that there are red dots indicating a methane leak. So this test is what we consider our gold standard and what we began, and we take it as the base for our preliminary data collection. So here are two pictures from our very preliminary data collection, and what jumps out at you immediately is the color variation. I would like to be abundantly clear that we cannot draw any conclusions from this color variation just yet, because this data has yet to be robustly validated. However, it is interesting that there is a color variation at all, so that is something that we will continue to look into as we go through the validation process. But what I would like for you to take away from this slide is not the color variation, but rather the mapping of this data. So this is a very simple test that we did. We went out onto Cummington Mall, which many of you I'm sure are familiar with, and rode the bike around just up and down a little bit on the street. And when we uploaded this data to our map, we were very pleased to see that the GPS that we have chosen and are using does measure up to that gold standard that I mentioned previously. So, excited by these results, we took our bike onto what we consider a more realistic bike ride and produced this graph. So this is a bike ride that we did up and down Cummington Mall, and then it went down Commonwealth Avenue as well. And again, we can see that the gold standard is met here. The data that we're collecting is on the resolution of one city block. And again, I will reiterate that we cannot draw any conclusions from the color variation, but again, it is very interesting that there is a color variation at all. And that brings me to our future work on this project. So as I mentioned earlier, we do have 9 circuit boards, but only 4 enclosures, and we're working to get all 9 circuit boards into enclosures to deploy all of those prototypes. As we collect all that data through the deployment, we want to enter the data validation stage against existing systems. So remember that map I showed you with the 7 air pollution monitors? Very conveniently, one is located in our backyard in Kenmore Station. So we'll be using that data to validate some of the data that we're collecting, as well as a system that's owned by the School of Public Health, again, to validate our system. We anticipate that while we go through that data validation stage, we'll have to go through a design iteration to improve our data collection capability. And as we exit the proof of concept phase, we hope to bring this project back to Blue Bike and solidify our partnership to begin beta testing in the greater Boston area. And with that, that is all I would like to share with you today, and I would be happy to take any questions.
Incredible job.
Thank you.
Okay, does anyone have any questions?
Thank you so much. This is so cool.
Thank you.
My question is kind of like, what are you going to do with the data that you collect once you collect it off the blue bikes?
That's a really great question. So our role in this project is to aid in the data collection, but we are not data scientists. So we are just, helping along in the collection phase and then going to, let the experts deal with the data as they do. So whatever comes out of this data set would be fantastic, but that's not really what the scope of our involvement in this project. Good question. Okay.
Hi, this is so cool. I really enjoyed learning about it, and I was really impressed by your ability to weatherproof it, and I was wondering if you could talk about what that process looked like.
That's a great question. So yeah, so we all know Boston weather can be crazy, and what we're really worried about specifically is rain. So currently, I unfortunately don't have an image of it, but currently the system is that the air flows into the enclosure and is met immediately with a hydrophobic mesh, which is a fancy way of saying it doesn't let any water through. So there's a slit on the bottom of the enclosure that any water that's collecting in the enclosure as it meets that initial hydrophobic mesh just flows out, and then the air is able to pass through into the rest of the enclosure. Yeah, good question. Any other questions?
Really great presentation, thank you. I just had a quick question about if you accounted for the fact that the blue bikes would have electric bikes now, because I would imagine that the frequency at which you're collecting the the air would be different if it goes faster?
Yeah, so that's a really great question, specifically about the speed of collection. So that's something that's also included in our future work to see, what the upper limit of data collection is, because currently we're just, riding around as we leisurely would. But again, with the introduction, as you said, of the electric blue bikes, we do see the speeds increasing of cycling in the city. So that's actually, we're trying to find the upper bounds of that. It's a really good question, yeah. But not yet have an answer for that, unfortunately.
We've got time for one more question if anyone's curious.
Hi there, thanks for your presentation. I'm curious, if we zoom out of Boston for a second, is this technology implemented on bicycles in other localities to monitor air quality?
That's a fantastic question. So there have been some studies that have tried to do this in other cities, and we are building on that work. The great thing about our monitor is that there are blue bike systems not only in Boston. I'm sure, in New York, there's the city bike system, a very, very similar. So if this project goes as planned, we hope to expand into other cities, because the bike sharing system is expanding in the US and also internationally as well.
Thank you so much, Sofiya.
Thank you,
We've got
everyone.
about 5 minutes until our next presentation.